Welcome to the T-Pac arcade. Today's game is Spacechase for the Atari 2600. In this 1981 shoot-'em-up from Apollo, your fleet of Mark 16 star cruisers is under attack by alien raiders from a distant galaxy. So, Spacechase may very well be the simplest space shooter I've ever played, and I kinda love that. The gameplay is basically just blasting endless waves of pixelated enemy craft. They appear in squadrons of 4, 5, or 6, and move back and forth in rows, firing neutron missiles at you. And as for your own ship, you fly around the bottom portion of the screen, returning fire. You do have limited vertical movement if you need to get a little closer to the aliens, but honestly, I stayed as far away as I could 99% of the time, because I value my life and don't want to cozy up to the laser launching bad guys any more than I have to. In any case, as far as your own laser launching goes, setting the difficulty switches to B instead of A lets you fire at a faster rate, so that's obviously what I did. And you can actually blast away the enemy missiles if you're lined up correctly, which even gives you a few extra points. Spacechase essentially has 3 levels. The first has waves of 4 purple enemies, which sort of look like those chunky old-school computer input adapters. The second has waves of 5 green enemies, which look like spooky ghoul faces and are slightly more aggressive than the adapters. And the third has waves of 6 black enemies, which look like bugs and are just downright mean. They fire fast, they move fast, and the fact that they come in half dozens certainly doesn't help either. But they're also worth the most points, so there's that. And I would have never even encountered these enemies if it weren't for the game variations that let you start on whichever level you want. Because in the default game, you have to score 10,000 points to move from level 1 to level 2, but you have to score 40,000 points to move from level 2 to level 3. And considering I never survived more than a few waves of the ghoul faces and maxed out around 12k on even my best runs, that just wasn't happening. Especially since you start with just 2 star cruisers in reserve and only get an extra one for every 10,000 points scored. I did want to see just how many lives it would take me to actually make it to level 3, so I cheated my way through with save states once and discovered that the answer was infinity. It would take infinity lives for me to survive until level 3, and infinity times 2 lives for me to survive any meaningful duration beyond that. See, as simple as Spacechase is, this game is ridiculously hard after the first level. The enemies spawn so close to you, their bullets are too fast and flickery and sporadic to dodge reliably, and they even fire homing missiles sometimes to lock onto you no matter where you go. A little chime rings out when a homing missile is fired, but it feels less like a warning alarm to take evasive maneuvers, and more like a funeral bell, because your fate is sealed the moment you hear it. Which makes it all the more mind-boggling that there are game variations where aliens fire homing missiles with even higher frequency than in the default game. There are actually a lot of game variations here, but they really boil down to combinations of just a few variables. Whether you start on level 1, 2, or 3, whether you're doing single-player or 2-player alternating, whether the enemies have limited homing missiles or frequent homing missiles, and whether you're battling in daytime or nighttime, which doesn't affect the gameplay, but it's a nice aesthetic touch. Speaking of which, I absolutely love the graphics in Spacechase. First off, it has this cool 2.5D viewpoint, where you can see the distant curvature of the moon against the starry sky, and craters move down the playfield to sell the illusion of scrolling. But the gameplay itself remains as a fixed 2D shooter for simplicity's sake. I also love the color palettes here. If the daytime-nighttime variations weren't enough evidence of this, you can really tell the game designers valued good use of color. Usually Atari game palettes are either too simple to comment on, or so gaudy that it looks like the artists were trying to use every color at their disposal just because they could. But here, the moon backdrop has a nice monochrome presentation to keep from being distracting, the enemy palettes stand out well against it, even on cool nighttime settings, and that stark blue of your ship and score counter at the top and bottom of the screen just balances everything so well. Chef's kiss, Apollo graphic artists. I only wish the missiles didn't flicker and change color so much, makes them even harder to dodge than they would normally be. And I also wish there were some more ambient space noises to fill out the soundscape a little bit. The laser and explosion effects are nice, but a little hollow all by themselves. The most novel aspect of Spacechase is actually that it doesn't really have any novel aspects. It's just simple, no-nonsense space shooting fun, which is easily my favorite thing about this game. It does what it does, and doesn't make a fuss about it. Now, if only it weren't so ridiculously hard after level 1. If I could change one thing here, I'd either slow down the enemy bullets or grant bonus lives at smaller score thresholds, like a new star cruiser every 2,000 points instead of 10,000 points. Overall, Spacechase is a neat, unassuming little Atari shoot-'em-up that's perfectly good for bite-sized play sessions. And although you could argue that it's all style over substance, I'll take style any day, if that means cool 8-bit aliens and star cruisers blasting lasers on the moon.